Hello, and welcome to a new video. This is in Minecraft. This is me reading 1-star reviews of Goodreads books that I gave 5 stars. So, the first one we'll be going through is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I personally loved this book, but obviously some of these people don't like it. So, here we go. Number 1 by Kristen Peppercorn. I hated this boring-ass, pompous-ass, dumb-ass book. What I liked, the gorgeous cover. That's it. Everything else sucked. Why it sucked. Number 1. Boring. Zzz. Number 2. The main character. Never in my life have I read about such a dull, naive, idiotic, clueless, worthless, Forrest Gump look-alike, boring, stupid person. She reminded me a lot of my younger self, actually. Well, yeah, she's 21 years old. Anyway, back to the review. I wouldn't want to know that person, let alone read about her. I would be embarrassed for her if I didn't hate her so much. She didn't even have a name, and that's probably because her parents knew she wasn't worth naming, since she would grow up to have absolutely no personality or brains whatsoever. Number 3, rip off Jane Eyre, why don't ya? Can we talk about that ending? Little bit, read exactly like some shit that went down in a much better book called Jane Eyre. 4, repetitive and insecure. One of my pet peeves in the main character is when they're insecure. This bench gets first place in the Special Olympic sport of insecurity. We had to listen to her go on and 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 on about how she isn't Rebecca. Grow a personality instead of hating on someone who had one. 5, insta-love. Can I even call it that? Another thing I hate. When people meet, say 2 words to one another and are instantly in love, and then get married only to find out, shocker, that they're not all that compatible. Gah! I don't know if it was insta-love. I mean, it was pretty quick, I will admit that, but I think it was over the span of a few weeks, and I'm pretty sure they started out kind of at odds. Anyway, number 6. Ooh, spooky plot twist. Please. I leave better plot twists than that in the toilet after my morning bowl of bran flakes. I kept saying to myself, there better be one hell of a plot twist for this boring shit to be worth it in the end. Nope, exactly how I guessed. I had a feeling it would rip off Jane Eyre, and I said if it did, I would burn this book. Looks like I better get some matches ready. I feel lied to. I feel betrayed by the high ratings. I feel rage and just a hint of gassy. I feel like throwing this book into a dumpster fire. So, it's been a while since I read Jane Eyre, but I'm pretty sure the plot twist in Jane Eyre was that he had a wife that was alive, not that he had a wife that's dead, which everybody knew that. So that's not really a plot twist. It's just the way she died. Technically different than the way everybody thought she died, which is not, that was like the exact opposite of what happened in Jane Eyre, where they didn't even know he was married and then they found out he had a wife that was still alive, and just insane. So your comparison, is it false? Anyway, back to Olivia this time. Disclaimer. Okay, so I wrote this review the day after I finished reading this book. I was angered and disturbed by the book at the time, and that hasn't changed, but I've wondered whether I ought to edit my original review or leave it as it is for a few months now, and at this point I just wanted to state that while my rating and opinions on the book stand, I now feel that this review seems too judgmental of those who do enjoy this book and the characters in it. Frankly, I still don't know how people could love the characters, and I still have major problems with those characters, but it's not my place, I don't think, to make a blanket statement about what other readers can and cannot appreciate in what is, after all, fiction. At the same time, I don't feel like going to the trouble of changing the review, so just be forewarned that what follows is ranty and a wee bit dramatic, cough, and probably too intolerant or even condescending towards people who love these characters. I still hate and I'm horrified by this story, but I think I may have gone a little overboard in my reaction towards fellow readers. For that, I apologize. Okay, you've been warned. Original September 2018 review. I never rate books 1 star, people. Just saying. Yeah, okay. Is everybody missing something? Because what the actual. Guys. Is this supposed to be a cautionary tale? Is it supposed to be about the dangers of becoming attached to someone that will literally turn a blind eye to murder? I hope some. I had some hope before I finished it that everyone loved this book so much because it was such a skillfully written cautionary tale, but then I read reviews, and from what I gather, that's not what people take away from this book. So that leaves us with the other nearly unthinkable option that readers have fawned over this book for decades while accepting it for what it is on the surface, that people actually swallow Maxim and the narrator as sympathetic or positive characters, and if that's the case, we need help, actual divine help. Does everybody literally just ignore the fact that Maxim killed his wife, that he killed her deliberately and unrepentantly because she was adulterous and because she was mean, that he killed her believing she was pregnant? Do not even at me. I mean, I guess it does kind of depend on whether you believe what Maxim says about Rebecca, but it sounds like she was kind of a psychopath. And I mean, she got what she wanted. She wanted to be murdered. And like, are you forgetting that she did that on purpose, believing he would kill her because she wanted to be murdered because she was dying of cancer and she didn't want to die that way? Like, excuse me. It's like, she got what she wanted. Like, she literally wanted to be murdered. And you're like, oh my god, he killed his wife. It's like, yeah. And she knew it when she goaded him like that because she wanted to die. Not of cancer. You know. Anyway, back to the review. I'm sick. I felt actual physical tightening in my chest and my stomach last night reading this, realizing that people like this man, realizing that people like our horrifyingly blind narrator accept and justify the fact that he killed his wife in cold blood. And I'm supposed to want to protect this murderer because his wife was disturbing and manipulative and unfaithful. I could swear, I wanted to swear last night. This makes me physically sick that generations of readers could be on board with the fact that Maxim and wife number 2 covered up the crime and got away with it. Wife number 2 herself is so problematic I can't even, and I haven't covered all of what I could attack in the character of Maxim and the situation surrounding the murder, but I don't have the energy to go over all my thoughts. It basically boils down to this. All the most beautiful prose in the world cannot help you if you're trying to normalize and justify bloody murder. This majorly disturbs me. What are we coming to if we can accept actual murder in a story like this, in a setting supposed to be real world and at least partially realistic, with such a blatant lack of repentance, in fact, with an explicit avowal of eternal unrepentance and no legitimate justification as if it was just a spoonful of sugar without even seeing it as wrong? How can we? How freaking can we? In my opinion, this book isn't trash. Trash, at least, is indifferent and careless and impotent. But this book, to me, something in this book is poison, at least if my fears about how it's been read over the years are justified. It's like, dang. You're right, that is a bit dramatic. I swear, some people, I don't know. I mean, I probably do this too with my books, but it's like, we're forgetting some of the plot points in these books when we're doing these reviews. Like, you're wrong. You're missing something. Anyway, next one by Lisa. I had very high expectations that were dashed, and then dashed some more. The heroine, who shall forever remain nameless, literally, which is annoying all on its own, is a shallow, limp, annoying young lady. No moral fabric, no backbone, no nothing. The entire book is her paranoid ramblings. Does he love me? No, he still loves Rebecca. It is like the precursor to bad YA drama. See my review on Fallen. Yuck. Even when confronted with the truth that her husband is a bad man indeed, what is Nameless character's reaction? Yay, he never loved her. He loves me. Please spare me from this crap. She's 21. She's a 21-year-old virgin at this point, you know? Like, some people are like that when they're 21-year-old virgins. They don't understand real life as opposed to what they read in books, you know? Like, some people are like that at 21 and virginity still intact kind of people, you know? you know? Like, yeah, it's young adult drama. She's a young adult marrying a 42-year-old man. That in itself is questionable, but, like, that's kind of how that works. Anyway, I finished it because I felt compelled to complete it, no cheating on my book challenge, and I really hoped that it, like wine, would improve with age, like perhaps Nameless would grow up. No such luck. What a disappointment. It is possible I would have liked it 20 years ago when I, too, was a melodramatic twit, and that is as nice as I can be about the experience. Yeah, exactly. If you were 20, you would understand what a 20-year-old is feeling. Derp. Derp. Anyway. Review by Flying Monkey. Wow, this really sucked. One of the most boring books I've ever read. Well, you can't love them all. Moving on. That was short and to the point. Next, by Aaron Henderson. I truly don't understand why this novel has such a high rating. It's awful, so incredibly dull and boring with almost no substance. Every single conversation goes like this. I saw a cat. You saw a cat? Yes. When? I saw the cat today. Today? Yes. No, I mean, I get it, thank you. The descriptions were way over the top and pointless. I'm not sure why Du Maurier needed 3 pages to describe each and every flower tree, but it was too much. I don't want to read 400 words about leaves. Get on with the story, please. And don't even get me started on the inner thoughts of the main character. What drivel. Not an interesting thought in her head. Now for the ending. What? It made no sense, and I feel as though it was supposed to shock me as a reader, but I found myself not really caring at all. Okay, and then we got the next one from Chandra. By the way, some of these have spoilers, if you weren't aware. Chandra, with a whole entire thing made of spoilers. Very rarely will I so passionately hate a book because it portrays immoral behavior. Perhaps the twist bothered me so much simply because I already had several gripes with this book, most of them lying with the unnamed protagonist, who I have dubbed Dumbass. Now, she isn't the only problem. The first and perhaps most obvious, upon reading a few pages into the book, problem is the plot. You read the back of the book, and in big letters it reads, "Last night I dreamt I went to Menderley again." This is your hook? Really? That's not a hook. It's something you say to your friend when there's a... And it seems to have cut off, so... Okay. Never mind that. Anyway, next, Farron. Wow, I really hated this book. Melodramatic, bellowing prose, characters so paper-thin and one-dimensional as to be cartoonish, and a narrator that with the consistency of oatmeal, whining, childish, insecure, annoying. There is absolutely nothing in this book to examine and enjoy. She's 21 years old! And a virgin. Marrying a 42-year-old man who had a wife previously. Like, that's what happens when you do that. Eek. Anyway, at the halfway point in the book, the predicted plot twist came and I threw it across the room. I gave up. Rebecca, it's not me. It's completely you. Update, the internet's told me to keep at it, so I persevered, and though the character of the narrator improved marginally as the narrative progressed, there just really wasn't much of anything that was surprising or enriching about the book. Would I have liked Rebecca if I'd read it at 13? Maybe. Anyway, Miriam Stern. The relief, now that it's over. Rebecca was meant to be the classic romance of my 2015 reading challenge. Not only was it horribly slow, but after the whole book, I questioned my own sanity. From this point forward, there are spoilers, so don't continue reading if that's not your thing. Meet Mrs. De Winter II, a character who has no name, just like she has no personality. Mrs. De Winter I, by the way, was Rebecca. She is the constant shadow between Mrs. Nameless and Maxim, the male, protagonist. At the beginning of the book, the gossip is all about how sad Maxim is now that he's lost his precious Rebecca and he will never love again. Basically, the sad story of the widower who's lost his soulmate. From the very start, I felt something strange going on with Rebecca. No one is so perfect, and certainly Maxim doesn't seem to remember her with much fondness. About 66% of the book, when things begin to pace up, the reader discovers that in the ultimate hissy fit, Maxim shot Rebecca dead. Turns out that Rebecca was a conniving female who cheated on Maxim from here to tomorrow and was apparently evil, the Darth Vader of her time. Now, here's some food for thought. Murder is never the answer. If your wife is an evil fembot, please divorce her, don't kill her. But his reputation in his upper class society, that was the whole reason he didn't divorce her. That's the whole reason he stayed married to her after she admitted to him 4 days later that she was evil. Because he cared about his reputation better. Like, come on. Read the book! And the fact that divorce would have created gossip is not a legitimate excuse to shoot someone through the heart. Okay. Should have continued reading that part, I guess. But, I mean, anyway. It's probably one of the elements that disturbed me the most about this book. Am I supposed to accept that just because Rebecca played Maxim like Candy Crush, he was justified in killing her? No, you're supposed to accept it because Rebecca wanted him to kill her so that she didn't die of cancer. She wanted to be murdered. Come on. Anyway, disturbing element number 2, Mrs. Nameless's reaction to Maxim's murderous instincts. She's fine with it because it means that her worst fears, that he had loved Rebecca all along, were unjustified. Wait, what? You read that right, folks. It's fine and dandy if your husband murdered his wife over no reason in particular because he didn't love her and loves you. Except there was reasons. There were several reasons that he killed her. Because she was evil and was cheating and said that she was pregnant and that, not his blood would inherit all his stuff. And she would win in the end. I mean, she did technically win in the end, though, still, by getting murdered, and now he's haunted for the rest of his life. And now that poor Mrs. the Winter II is also haunted by someone she never even met. So, I mean, she got what she wanted, and she won. I mean, he got away with killing her, which is probably not what she wanted, but he's miserable now, and will always be, so. And now he doesn't have a house because Rebecca's friend/housekeeper burned it down. So anyway, I think that's what I liked about it the most, was like, the villain who was dead still wins in the end. In a roundabout sort of way. And you don't get that all the time. So yeah, there we go. Anyway, you read that right, folks. It's fine and dandy if your husband murdered his wife over no reason. There was a reason. In particular, because he didn't love her and loves you. There was something so wrong about that message that I can't grasp it. It sends the wrong idea when we classify this as a romance. He's a murderer. He deserves to be punished for his crimes. Also, he kind of treats Mrs. Nameless in a manner that doesn't coincide with his latter feelings of love. He's distant, cold, and a bit of a douche. I can't. I just want to forget this book, preferably lock it up somewhere dark where I'll never have to see it again, or be reminded that it exists, probably next to my Furby. God, not next to the Furby! Well, anyway, that's Rebecca. I'll have another clip for another book in the same video, hopefully, although we'll see. Next clip, this time about a Sand County Almanac, which I didn't realize I gave in 5 stars. It has been a while, so I think I did like the stories in there, so let's see what the 1-star reviews are. Let me start off by saying that I love to read, unless I have just finished. You will never catch me without a book, a slip of scrap paper shoved in wherever I was last forced to stop. That is why it came to a shock to me that for 4 nights in a row, a Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold ended up lost in my blankets somewhere as I fell asleep trying to get through it. For some reason, this book could not hold my attention at all. I wasn't sure why, but none of the chapters or even paragraphs seemed to relate to one another. They're not really supposed to? Anyway, and the way Leopold formed his thoughts was just too dull to be something I could read. To be fair, I gave it a chance reading through all of the months and starting into the essays on conservation from Round River. I even got almost halfway through those, but to be honest, I just could not finish. Because of this, I will have to admit that I had no favorite part of the book, nor did I have an opinion on much Leopold had to say. The only things I learned when reading this were that geese travel in multiples of 6, and the white flowers that cover the ground in the spring are called draba. In my opinion, a Sand County Almanac might have been a lovely book in the 40s when it was published, but it is time for more up-to-date versions of the appreciation of our environment. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, this. I can imagine why somebody would give it 1 star, because it's like, it's very niche. It's for the environmentalists in us, the people that love nature and like having nature described to them. Like, I remember it was somebody talking about Moby Dick or whatever, and they're like, if you like, it's like, who wants to read about whale anatomy? I'm like, I do. Because I'm weird like that. That was me with the Sound Canny Almanac. I'm like, who wants to read about conservation and plants and stuff? I do. I like that kind of stuff. Anyway, that was Samantha. Next is Rachel B. This was immensely boring. The majority of the book is Leopold waxing poetic about various animals and plants. In the final section, he speaks about the application of ethics to ecology, which was slightly more thought-provoking, but not necessarily well-written or organized. He said, just a handful of things that I believe were worth writing about, but I have to believe that someone somewhere has done much greater justice to nature writing. Note, there are references to Darwinian evolutionary theory as fact. That's kind of how scientists think. They believe evolution existed. That's kind of a given in most science books. Anyway, Sophie H. Whilst the subject matter was one of my favorites, outdoor nature, I found the writing style inconsistent and unappealing. I was seriously anchored when I read about Leopold's pumping lead into a female wolf who was present with cubs. What is it with men and fucking shooting? Can't you just let life be? What is the matter with you? A read that started as alright, but nothing that would blow me away, closely followed by Leopold, the wildlife murderer, pissed me right off. I mean, there is a thing about, population control. I don't remember the wolf thing. I do remember him killing a fawn. Because if he killed the mother, the fawn would have died anyway. But also there's a whole thing about deer kind of need their population culled before they start overgrazing and then ruining the environment. So that was why he was shooting the deer. I don't know about the wolves, though. Because I feel like the wolves were endangered. I don't remember the wolf part, but if he did do that, that is questionable. And I don't agree with that. Anyway, let's see. Matthew says, everything I hate about nonfiction, dry and meaningless, and while foundational, plenty of better texts have been written since then. My favorite part of this book was the introduction written by Barbara Klingslever. The sketches were neat too. I hate when people say a book was boring, as I feel that it shuts down the conversation. Anyway, this book was boring. Thank you, Matthew, for your review. Now we got Shiraz. I think I am not the audience for this book, and I am not entirely sure who would be. Environmentalists and nature lovers who like that kind of stuff. And you read it as an audiobook? Yeah. You're gonna have to read the actual book and get the sketches. For me, this was a nature lover's strange stream of thoughts collected into a book. Yeah. There was no structure or central point that I could discern. There wasn't supposed to be. It's an almanac. It's just him going through the year in different places, talking about what's going on in those places at that time of year. That's how that works. Only the broad themes around conservation and respecting the nature. Considerable time is spent talking about specific flora and fauna of Wisconsin and its ecology, with the presentation ranging from somewhat scientific to purely speculative. Maybe this would be a good nature documentary? Probably, yeah. I'm honestly a little dumbfounded and hope others got more out of it. Yes, I did. Let's see. Peter Shireman. I was so excited to read this. I wanted to love it. I really did. I remember being an undergraduate at UW. I'm assuming that's University of Wisconsin or Washington. I mean, this takes place in Wisconsin, so hopefully Wisconsin. Probably Wisconsin, and living steps from Aldo Leopold Hall. Okay. Probably Wisconsin. Anyway, unfortunately, that neighborhood nostalgia failed to translate into any sort of enjoyment or value from this collection of essays and stories. The prose is beautiful, yet the writing is still somehow dry and a slog to get through. And as a big reader of history, I like to think I can get through some pretty dry text and feel more knowledgeable for having made it to the other side, but I almost had to add this to the do not finish Hall of Shame. I was also personally turned off by Leopold's confusing habit of describing for pages and pages the beauty, majesty, and irreplaceable natural value of nature of a creature, and then in the next paragraph, gruesomely detailing his experiences shooting them for pleasure and watching them die. This happens multiple times. The thing is, death is a part of nature, and I get how that would be confusing, but also you gotta kind of accept that death is kind of necessary, and sometimes it really is for environmental reasons, like, as I mentioned earlier, with deer overpopulation causing overgrazing, which causes soil degradation, and then all the soil goes down the river to the Gulf of Mexico, and then there's no good soil to farm out with, kind of thing, which he does mention in the book, is the whole soil erosion from overgrazing. So, yeah. A half dozen others, evidently grown pups, sprang from the willows and all joined in a welcoming melee of wagging tails and playful maulings. In a second, we were pumping lead into the pack. Okay, that's the other thing that they were talking about. But with more excitement than accuracy, when our rifles were empty, the old wolf was down and a pup was dragging a leg into impassable slide rocks. Oh, so they're talking about like an alpha wolf. See, the thing with wolves is that the alphas are the only ones that mate. So killing the alpha wolf will mean that more wolves will mate, like different wolves will mate, and therefore biological diversity instead of rampant inbreeding, because then everybody's related. Like that's bad. I think that was the dealio. Avoid inbreeding by, killing the really old wolves that aren't even... Actually, I think if they're old, they're not even breeding. So they're not breeding, and nobody else is allowed to breed. Which is an issue. Not to mention all of the more that the old wolves breed, the more that the wolves are related. And then inbreeding, which causes deformations. So that might be what was going on there. Ecology. I remember only my unspeakable delight when my first duck hit the snowy ice with a thud and lay there, belly up, red legs kicking. I've never hunted in my life, so maybe I just don't get it. I don't even think I want to at this point. Many readers will love a Sand County Almanac. I felt about as enthusiastic about it as the aforementioned duck probably felt about his sudden lead transfusion. Some of these reviews are great. But yeah. Another thing is that hunting licenses and fishing licenses are also the way that a lot of conservation organizations make money to conserve. Which is kind of ironic, but sometimes conservation does require some animals dying so as not to overpopulate or oversaturate the population with a certain amount of genes that leads to biological non-diversity, Thank God for my couple of years of environmental science education for being able to give you some insight into what's going on in this book. And then, let's see, Rosemary says, hands down, the second half is one of the most boring books I have ever read. I know it is iconic, but seriously, so boring. The first half, more personal, was much better. And I think I will leave this clip at that and go on to the next book, or have lunch and then go on to the next book, because it's 3 o'clock and I haven't eaten anything. Anyway, Oh, and there goes my alarm telling me to do my laundry. So, my laundry is still on the spin cycle, and I took a bite of my sandwich, so we're all good for a second. Next book is Death in Yellowstone, Accidents and Foolhardiness in the Full First National Park. What is with my reading? Anyway, Bonnie Morse, who is an author. Interesting. It takes a deft hand with a special sense for black humor of tragedy to write a book like this. Former Ranger Whittlesley has neither. His recounting of deaths in Yellowstone National Park is, in theory, everything you could want in horror, wonder, and human interest, but it's seriously limited by being only a recounting of facts. What's wrong with that? He knows stories, but is not a storyteller. He has a pile of information to convey, and he does successfully convey it, but it is not assembled in a way that makes it any more than the sum of its parts. I feel like that is kind of the point. It's about death in Yellowstone, so you talk about death in Yellowstone. And considering the macabre nature, making it, over-dramatizing it would be a disservice to the people that actually died. So, yeah. Each chapter focuses on a particular manner of death, e.g. boiled alive, or eaten by bears, or gassed by nature, and begins with an exhaustive scientific explanation of the cause of death, how therms work, what happens when human flesh is boiled, how many bears are in the park, and what species and what they eat, what poison gases are produced by hot springs or thermal features if you're a pretentious gas bag, and how each one smells, tastes, kills. After the dry recitation of facts about the subject, he tells some things he read in ranger reports, newspaper articles, and heard from other people. Yeah. It's not like he's watching all of these people die. He's gotta get it from reports and people. I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, this is hearsay, but I mean, what else are you gonna get, especially for stuff from the 1800s when he wouldn't have been alive? Like, nobody's got a time machine. He's not going around being like, watching all these people die. Like, ooh, this is actually what happened. Anyway, Mr. JFC It Hurts went into the spring. Went into the springs on this date at this time for this reason, was pulled out by these people, suffered this horrifying list of injuries, died on this date at this time, and this is what the witnesses said. Then he'll talk about the legalities of park liability a little, mention any related lawsuits and their outcome, and for cases covered heavily in the media or involving a dead ranger, heroes all. Include some details lifted from their obituary or eulogy that was definitely written by someone who knew them. That's how eulogies work! Oh my god. Does this person not know how the world works? How things... Oh my god, they talked about what actually happened, and also... oh my god, they talked about what happened and what people say happened. How could they? This is a nonfiction book. That's kind of how you non-fictionize... Oh, you people. Anyway, in the revised introduction of the second edition, 2014, he notes with pride that he must have gotten all of the details right and not offended anyone, unlike the authors of more popular, off-the-wall, Death in Yosemite gripping accounts of all known fatal mishaps in America's first protected land of scenic wonders, and over-the-edge death in Grand Canyon, because he was never sued by a family member or survivor of the dead. Good? That's good. That means he didn't sensationalize what he was writing the way you seem to want them to. You know, that gets people sued for writing books. Like, yeah, it's cool to have all those sensational stories, but if they're insulting dead people and the people that survived them are like suing them for defamation, like that's the problem, you know? Anyway, although I wasn't able to read every single dry, pretentious, pedantic paragraph of this book, I feel safe in hazarding a guess as to why. Whittlesley can't be sued over anything he writes because everything he writes is part of the public record somewhere. Yeah, that's how you write a nonfiction book so you don't get fucking sued. You use actual records. And you're an author? And you don't understand that? I wonder how many lawsuits you have against yourself, because you seem like you would be towing the line towards getting sued if you ever wrote a nonfiction book. Anyway. It's in the ranger logs, court documents, newspapers. His entire book is one long, largely unattributed quote from 1,000 sources, all bare facts that can't be argued. Good. It's a nonfiction book. It's supposed to be facts. Does it absolutely suck that he writes about bears stashing human remains for later meals as standard bear caching behavior? Of course. Is it gross and creepy and kind of reprehensible to specifically tell the world that the bear ate a man's entire pelvic region? Or that after ripping open a tent and dragging a sleeping camper out by his head, it consumed fully 70 pounds of the man's body weight? God, yes. Would you just die if you saw your own spouse, brother, husband, father described that way by name along with his physical description before and after the attack? I'd sure want to. Yeah, I guess that just kind of... I mean, it seems... This person read this book specifically to make a bad review about it because they don't like this kind of content. That's all I can say. Like, why did you bother reading this if you obviously cannot stand this kind of content? Because you wanted something to complain about, maybe? Like, some people just... Anyway. But can you sue over it? No, because it's just the facts, and if you can't sue the rangers who wrote the first reports, or the medical examiners who wrote the final ones, or any of the witnesses, investigators, or journalists in between, then you can't sue this author for compiling the data into his handy index of death facts, and no second thing. You can't even get upset when he suggests that your mostly consumed husband, whose head was never found, could be considered responsible for his own death because after a long day of hiking, with his campsite clean and his food properly stashed, he retired to his registered tent in an open campground wearing dirty socks when he really should have known better than to be anything other than completely odorless, since the judge allowed that argument at trial. And Whittlesley isn't taking a side. He's just repeating the facts. To be able to sue him, he'd have to say something new and add a thought or two that aren't also dry facts dredged up from his years as a park ranger, but he never manages to do that. This isn't so much a book to read and enjoy as it is the base material for a really great National Park Ranger podcast. That the kind of guy might get sued over. I mean, I can't remember about the trial or anything, but I feel like who are you gonna blame? It's man versus bear. The bear's doing what bears do. And the man was doing what he did, and they coincided, and the guy got killed. I'm like, I mean, these are the risks you take when you go into the wilderness. That there's gonna be bears, there's gonna be wolves, there's gonna be deer and bison and all that shit. They're gonna do what they do, and it might impede on what you do in a way that kills you. And honestly, that should be a given. But nobody ever thinks that way, so... Anyway, a minor thing that really annoyed me personally, that I would have disliked even in a better book, is the author's constant use of the phrase obvious and hidden dangers, as in the park is only obligated to warn of obvious and hidden dangers, or people need to look out for obvious and hidden dangers. Besides my own pedantic knowledge that particular phrasing is most commonly used to list two similar things, not two totally opposite things, clear and present danger, clear and simple instructions, smooth and peaceful trip. What other dangers are there? If the park only has to warn of the obvious dangers that anyone can see and the hidden dangers that are hard to see, what are they not obligated to warn of? What dangers should people not be on the lookout for when they're watching for the obvious and hidden ones? Shouldn't that just be dangers, like all of them? This is never explained, nor does he ever use any other phrase, occasionally to give a broader view. I wonder if he talks like this to other rangers and visitors to the park. When he dies, will he be remembered as the obvious and hidden dangers guy? I think that goes in with what I was saying about, like, this is nature. If nature things happen that kill you, like you should know. Like, some of these things you should know are like, don't do that, that could kill you. Or, I mean, I think everybody knows bears are dangerous. So going to a place where bears exist is dangerous. So that's kind of the idea, like, if this is dangerous in any other context, it is also dangerous in this context. And shouldn't have to be said because you already know this. And I mean, I think the main thing is that, a lot of these people probably were warned not to do stuff, and they did it anyway, and then they're suing the park for something that they probably were told they were warned of, or it was assumed that they knew, because in every other context, a bear is dangerous. Like that kind of thing. Wait, did he mean obvious and hidden dangers? Am I emphasizing it wrong in my head? That doesn't completely fix the problem. It does nothing for park liability, but it helps. This is why you need more than one phrase if you want to emphasize a single concept over 1,000 times in a 400-page text. Yeah, I would agree that if he didn't explain it in any other way, that would be kind of, yeah, that would be annoying. If you're like, I don't know what you mean, but he keeps on saying it that way. It also bears mentioning that there are a lot of bad dog stories in here. Not stories of bad dogs, though some do show questionable judgment, even for dogs, but bad stories about dogs. Just casually slipped in all over the place, like dog do in tall grass, ready to strike when you least expect it. I did not, in fact, see a single mention of a dog that wasn't a complete, dry, pompous, and pedantic horror. So, not for nothing, don't take your dogs to Yellowstone. Good advice, actually, considering they're animals that will affect the other animals that are in the park, and honestly might piss those animals off and cause danger. It's like, yeah. Don't take your dog where there are wild animals, because they will either attack the wild animals and cause an issue, or the wild animals will attack them and cause an issue. No good can possibly come of it. Correct. Don't argue with me, just get a sitter or go somewhere else. And probably also don't read this book unless you just really want to know how many ways a person can die in Yellowstone. If you read one or both of Michael P. Giglieri's books mentioned above and want more of that, this is not more of that. Because it's not Michael P. Giglieri. Woo! Who'd have known? Anyway, this is especially irritating with short chapters like Gas to Death, which dedicates more space to what kind of gases and where and how they work than it does to actual deaths, because there have only been like 2. One of them is from Cowboy Time, so it's just a probable COD for a week-old corpse. Yeah, I think maybe they had gotten that one down people's throats enough that nobody did that again. Well, then they also have all those, fences and walkways, so you don't have to walk around the damn, you don't have to accidentally walk into the damn pools anymore. It's kind of how safety precautions work. Ugh. Do I even want to continue reading? That was one review, and I'm already, done. I don't know. Let's go to the next one. Book Concierge. The subtitle states accidents in foolhardiness in the first national park. I've had this on my TBR for some time. In general, I like nonfiction about natural history and the great outdoors. I read Jack Olson's Night of the Grizzlies a few years ago and found it fascinating and compelling. I was expecting something akin to Olson's work with this book and was sorely disappointed. Whittlesley gives a recitation of incidents in the park and surrounding communities, divided into categories/chapters. The first two are fairly interesting despite the dry, factual delivery. Whittlesley begins with people who have been burned, scalded by falling, or diving into various hot springs. The second chapter is devoted to encounters with bears, primarily grizzlies. In each chapter, he relates the incidents in chronological order, beginning with vague reports of events in the late 1800s for which we have minimal historical data or first-hand accounts. He includes chapters on poisonous plants, falls, runaway horses, Indian battles, suicide, car accidents, drowning, and avalanches, among others. I appreciate the amount of work involved in gathering all this information, and Whittlesley obviously spent time trying to corroborate various accounts, frequently without success, though he noted his efforts. However, the delivery of this information is so dry and just the facts, ma'am, that I quickly grew bored. Yeah, that's the problem with something of this nature, is that it has to be just the facts, or you could get sued for your speculations. Unless you happen to have sources for your speculations from people who also had such speculations. So it's like, you can't sue me, sue them, you know. But anyway, The Accidental Reader reviews, there are many ways to die in Yellowstone. It was hard to read all of this book, not because of an overwhelming sense of tragedy, but because of a fully massive amount of detail. I don't care about the names and dates of every fall victim, nor about where those people are buried. Well, some people would be pissed if you didn't put everything that you could in there. Like, I would be kind of miffed if I'm like, oh, that's not everybody that died, you know? In a book about death. Like, I like thorough. Even if it does happen to be more like, oh, there were like these 5 people we don't know much about, but we think that happened. Like, you know, add it all. Put it all in there. So you get a full picture, you know? I don't care about the names, dates, and every fall victim, but about where those people are buried. Some chapters I briefly paged through because I did not care enough to read this level of detail about murders that occurred because one miner stole $4 from another miner in the late 1800s. Even the air crashes I skimmed over were not interesting to me, I suppose because there is very little story attached to the vast majority of these cases. The most interesting chapters involve the geysers and the waters. Don't get off the boardwalk and risk falling through the thin crust, and don't jump in after your dog. The water can exceed 180 degrees Fahrenheit. The burn victims all seem to languish for a good 3 days or so before perishing. A terrible scenario. Avoid the hot water, but also do not go swimming. The big lakes are high in altitude and very deep, making for frigid temps in the low 40s and allowing for 6-foot waves when a sudden storm arises. Boating can be a terrible risk, as we learned by a Boy Scout troop who arrived with homemade canoes. Only some of the boys survived the trip. Since visiting Yellowstone many years ago and learning how the Belgian, a hot pool, got its name, I have wanted to read this book because so many people have mentioned it. However, I don't recommend it. Too much of a slog. I am glad that while searching for this book, I somehow chose to read Ranger Confidential first. That was a much better book for those looking to understand more about the tragedies which happen in our national parks. I think I'll end there, because I don't know, man. I thought I can deal with these bad reviews, but some of them are just getting really annoying. I can't deal with it. Gross. God, I made it like through 3 reviews and it's already almost 20 minutes long. My God. Yeah, they like rambled on. Like, they're talking about how this thing is rambling on with too many details, and they're over here rambling on with too many details. I get through 3 reviews and it's 20 minutes. Gross. Well, I've had an official lunch break, and I took the dog for a walk, and my stuff's in the dryer now. So now we're on to the next book. A Series of Unfortunate Events, The Penultimate Peril. These look very succinct. Or the first two do, at least. Anyway, Sydney Shook says, least favorite of the books by far. I don't know if it's because I've already read so many of these books that I'm finding it boring now, but I could not get into this one. One book of the series left to go. Iggy says, you don't like the story, but you really want to know what's happening next. Nikki says, I've decided the series is too repetitive and the tone of the books is too annoying, pedantic, and condescending, so I'm not going to finish reading it. Just reading the first book was fine, but more than that was a trial. You can see this same review on the other books in this series I have shelved. Sorry, I don't like shelving just part of a series, and my review might help someone. I have more detailed reviews of the first 3 books, with links here, here, and here. And then, let's see. Adam Cleaver says, read the entire series, started off okay and was nice and easy to read. However, the further into the story you read, the worse it gets. Instead of an interesting, clever plot, the writer just goes off the wall and it all seems stupid. And not Alice in Wonderland type of stupid either. Finished the series and it felt cheated out of a few weeks of my life. Haley says, I hated this one, not much happens. Yeah, I guess after the... Yeah, I guess this one's a little slower than this and the last one, I guess. Kind of are a little slower than the others, because at this point they're just hiding, they're not chasing. And then we got Catherine with spoilers saying, the most stupidest thing about this book is the trial scene where everyone is wearing blindfolds. I mean, what the hell? The Baudelaires are traveling with a very pregnant Kit Snicket in a taxi on their way to the Hotel Denouement. Justice Strauss is to put Count Olaf on trial with the help of the High Court. They encounter a man named Dewey that actually wants to and tries to help them, but at the court hearing, Olaf quickly shoves... That does not happen at the court hearing. This happens before the court hearing. Olaf shoves the harpoon gun into Baudelaire's hands, and the gun goes off and hits Dewey, and he dies. Kate Snicket is the love of his life and is carrying his baby. A fire breaks out at the hotel, and a lot of people die, or maybe. So you never see Esme, Justice Strauss, Mr. Poe, or Carmelita ever again. Indicating that they probably perished in the fire. The Baudelaires stare away on a boat. Stupid, stupid book. Well, you did misread some of what happened and the order in which things happen. And the whole point of the court is that the other 2 judges on Justice Strauss's thing are the man with no hair but a beard and the woman with hair but no beard, who are on the evil side of the schism. But, yeah. And Dewey knows where the sugar bowl is, but he dies with that knowledge. And Esme's totally pissed. Because it's her sugar bowl. You're forgetting all the convoluted side plots. Come on. Let's see. Now we got Jake. This is the 12th in the series of Unfortunate Events books. And probably the second worst in the series. To me, I found it uninteresting. It's about Violet, Klaus, and Sunny returning from the Grim Grotto, and they get jobs at the Hotel Denouement as concierge. They go around trying to help, and ironically, they happen to run into Esme and Camilla, it's Carmelita, from the previous book. Happen? They're chasing after them. Everybody's there. That's the point. Everybody's there. And then the rest of the book is the same as the others. I didn't like this at all. It was boring, and it appears as if Lemony ran out of ideas. After reading this, I'm not sure I could finish the last one. It's not ironic that they ran into the other characters. All of VFD is at the hotel. Because it's the last safe place. Derp. Like, did you review this, like, way after you read it? That's the only thing I could think of. I don't know. How they... people. Alexis Chateau, who is an author, surprisingly. My least favorite of the series thus far, just when you thought the book couldn't get any more repetitive, Snicket finds a way to make it so. I was bored to death, and I no longer sympathize with the Baudelaires. Count Olaf is right. They've become villains themselves, constantly putting their own selfish desires above others and endangering other people's lives in the process, so that they can preserve their own, even the people who have gone through great lengths to try to help them. I mean, he's right, and that's the point. That's what makes it interesting. That you find out the good people aren't that good. Because the whole reason Count Olaf hates the Baudelaires is because their parents killed his parents. And Esme hates the Baudelaires because their mother stole the sugar bowl from them. Although you don't find that out until the very end of the series, because that's when you find out that their mother's name is Beatrice, and it's the Beatrice that Lemoney's been harping on the whole time. Anyway, Dana says this installment was a buzzkill. The 11th installment was exciting and had me hooked looking forward to this one. Unfortunately, the ball was dropped. The story was uninteresting and anticlimactic. The children don't seem to be learning much from their escapades, and the author spent more time defining words than actually telling the story. This was a very underdeveloped story and definitely needed more substance. I don't think the children are learning anything from their escapades for the last several books. Because at this point, they're just trying to survive. And they do technically learn a lot, like, the sugar bowl is Esme's. They kind of get where the sugar bowl actually is at this point. That their parents killed Olaf's parents, and that's why he hates them so much. You know, all that. That there was a schism when all of the adults in the story were like 4 years old. So, yeah. I think they learned a little more about what the hell is going on behind the scenes. Let's see. Aspen Bassett, also an author. I have overlooked a lot of things in order to enjoy these books, but this one is a little much. I might not have all the motherly instincts, but I have been around enough kids to have a limit. This one crossed it. Also, one thing I loved about this series was that however terrible the deeds done to the kids, they were still good kids. Well, not anymore. I don't think they've been good kids for a while. It started in the hostile hospital. When they stole the keys to get snuck into the library to see the Snicket file, and then, I mean, obviously it's not their fault that the frickin' library got destroyed by Esme and her rampage trying to find the sugar bowl, but they are blamed for that, and they're blamed for Jacques Snicket's murder when he was being this guy who was made out to be Count Olaf was actually Jacques Snicket, and they got blamed for that. I mean, nobody has thought they were good kids since, actually, probably ever, but definitely not after the Vile Village. And they've been doing some sketchy things since then. So, I don't know what you're going on about. Oh, they're not good kids anymore. Like, they haven't been for a while. They've been doing some sketchy stuff, trying to survive. And honestly, you'd probably do some sketchy stuff yourself to survive if you had to. Anyway, that's the end of this one. That one was pretty short. I got through the whole, it's like, I guess it was half. It was 1 through 10 of 20. So, yay, I finished this one. Next up, we got A Series of Unfortunate Events, The End. 1-star reviews, which are probably going to be the same, mostly the same as the previous one, but let's see. Barb says, "This book infuriated me. What a lazy author. Taking us down the garden path through 12 books and then ending the series without really completing the story. As a children's librarian, I no longer recommend this series to kids. I hate to see them as disappointed as I was at this really stupid final book. Shame on you, Mr. Snicket. You took the chicken's way out. Next time, have an idea of where you expect the series to go before you start it. Truly shameful." It's a series of unfortunate events. That's kind of how that works, I would think. You know, it's unfortunate, but it's a series of unfortunate events. Not to mention, there are other books. This is this series, but there are other books that kind of go into it. The whole point of VFD is that it's a secret organization, so we don't know everything. Which maybe that is cheap, but it would be kind of weird for a secret organization to have all of its information right there. And another thing I'd like to point out is that if these kids were really as smart as they're made out to be, they would have been dragged away by VFD in the middle of the night like everybody else. But supposedly they weren't smart enough, and that's why they don't know much. At least Violet would have. I think all the other people that were dragged away in the middle of the night were 12. So I guess Klaus would have too. Sunny might have still had like 10 years, but... yeah. That was one thing I noticed. I was like, hey, wait a second. All these people got dragged away in the middle of the night at like 12 years old, but here the Baudelaires are, and even the Quagmires too. They're like old enough to be dragged away in the middle of the night, but they're not getting dragged away. Is there a reason? Are they not that smart? You know. Anyway. Next one, Elizabeth. I'm sorry, what? What was the point of the previous 12 books? I understand the whole idea that it's a series of unfortunate events, so it can't really end happily, but the story just ended in the middle of nowhere with no answers to anything. The Quagmires, the Sugar Bowl, VFD, the whole thing just seems really pointless now. Such is life. I think that's the point. Such is life. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they answered the question of the Sugar Bowl in the 12th book, that it's at the bottom of, like, there's a library at the bottom of the lake in front of Hotel Del Mall, and that's where the Sugar Bowl is. And then I think there's then Lemony Snicket has another series where I guess they mention the big unknown that got the Quagmires. And obviously, as I mentioned, VFD is a secret organization, so you'd kind of hope that not all the information is readily available. Yeah, I think maybe that's the point that Lemony Snicket was trying to make. Or Daniel Handler, if you want to be proper. That some stories don't have a satisfying ending. And kids need to get used to that before they end up having to read adult books where that's the case. Anyway, Liz. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. What a poor effort from the guy everybody absolutely loved. I wanted to go back and read the series again to find more allusions I almost certainly wouldn't have picked up the first time around, but I can't be bothered to. Well, that's your problem. Now, I would have if there had been any sort of plot resolution to keep me going through to the... They cut that part off. Very bad from a commercial point of view, as I'm certainly not going to buy the series now, am I? I felt, well... I mean, if you read the whole series, you don't really need to buy it, do you? I felt so cheated, not knowing the end. The feeling I got upon finishing the series was that Daniel Handler got so tangled up in his own plot that he couldn't work out how to round it off, which smacks of poor authorship. Even worse, that he didn't respect the readers, his readers, enough to give us a proper plot and a feeling of satisfaction after all that slogging through misery after misery experienced by the Baudelaires. Instead, he just strung us along for a pointless, repetitive journey that dragged through 13 books, and yes, okay, if you want to get technical, a 14th as well. Even worse. And for what? A non-ending, a nothing. The whole point of the series is just that, to tell a story, to unravel the secrets of a tale, not to provide random excerpts of a tale, but to give you the whole thing in a way that you can understand. I personally feel that I've been insulted. I've read all these books to be entertained, waiting breathlessly for a conclusion, and instead, apparently the author didn't care enough about why books are read in the first place. Nobody wants to be preached at. People read to enjoy themselves. This wasn't enjoyable. You know, he did say, stop reading. Like, he's telling people not to read these, and obviously you're just mad that he was right. If it was a short story or even a poem, I wouldn't mind at all. That's where the ideas such as lack of closure belong. But a whole long and how series is just too long a wild goose chase to bother with. It's a crime against the art of storytelling to let those books still be regarded as a tale. I do want the plot holes patched up, but before the last book came out, I was on tenterhooks. I couldn't wait to see what this guy had done. I was expecting some literary, conniving, plot-weaving, twisting triumph from Daniel Handler. Something that would fantastically weave all these elements into a complete and breathtaking whole. What we got was unspeakable, no closure, give me a break. Yeah, wouldn't be surprised if Daniel Handler's whole point was that there would be no closure, because it's a series of unfortunate events. Like, you're not supposed to be satisfied by this. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually what he was going for, was to make people upset. Like, that's what this story is about, is upsetting people. Because that's how... I mean... Sometimes people don't get closure, okay? And a children's story is a good way to tell kids that sometimes there is no closure. And obviously, you didn't have that growing up as a kid, so now you're pissed that there's no closure. Because you're expecting all books to have closure. See, that's why you need to read it as a kid. That way it can be like, you learn the lesson of some stories in life don't have closure. So that when you're an adult and you come across a book that doesn't have closure, you're not like, oh, this is so bad, pathetic, I hate you, gross. Yeah. I just realized that this whole video has become more of me being like, why these people are wrong, than reading the reviews. But some of these people, like, some of them, like, they literally just are forgetting certain plot points that make their complaints, that answer their complaints. Like, if you remembered this, you wouldn't be so mad about that. You know? Anyway. You know, this is a perfect place to end the video, because it's literally called The End. Bye!